Hello, I'm Annette Young and welcome to the 51%, a show about women reshaping our world. Coming up, how the Yellow Vest movement in France is attracting a number of female protesters as a report shows that women make up the bulk of workers in low-paid jobs in Europe. Also, as India struggles with the push for equality, we meet Rohena Gera, one of the growing number of female filmmakers emerging from the subcontinent. And the ancient skills of the Bosnian Coppersmith have been passed from father to son for generations, yet now, for the first time ever, a woman has become an expert in the field. But we begin here in France, where hundreds of women protesters have joined the Yellow Vest movement. They see themselves as being part of the working poor, women who are struggling to make ends meet despite having work. A recent report from Oxfam International focusing on Europe revealed women are twice as likely to find themselves in uncontracted, insecure and low-paid jobs than their male counterparts. Our team on the ground went to meet some of those donning the yellow vest.
Hundreds of women took to the streets of Paris in January. They sported their yellow vests in a peaceful protest with a forceful message.
I'm tired of just surviving. The government must wake up and realise that we, the working class, exist.
I'm a care worker in a retirement home. I earn €1,175 a month. My son's on welfare. He's the one who helps me pay my bills. I'm scared of ending up homeless.
These women aren't alone in their struggles. Outside Paris, Claudia and her husband, Fabien, are moving out of their house. They can no longer pay their rent or their bills.
The last thing I did before going to bed was check my bank accounts. And it was the first thing I did when I woke up. I thought, what are we going to do?
Claudia found a solution. With Fabien and her son, she's set to move in with her sister, Laura, who lives in a house nearby.
Salut. Et voilà, j'arrive.
The garden shed will have to be extensively renovated before it can welcome Claudia and her family. Her male family members, construction workers, will take on the task. In the meantime, Claudia and Fabien will sleep in the living room. They'll help Laura and her husband with home expenses.
We're also in dire financial straits. We count every penny. So I thought, why not all live together, kind of like roommates?
The women most at risk of poverty are single mothers. Working part-time jobs, Sandrine struggles to provide for her daughter.
I can't just work any shift because I have to take care of my daughter, so I can't work nights or weekends.
Sandrine earns €1,200 a month, including €300 in child support. But after rent and the bills, she has very little left for things like food and clothing.
Right now, I can't turn the heat on. If I do, I'll have to pay €50 to €60. I can't afford that.
According to Oxfam, a third of single mothers in France are at risk of poverty, a figure that jumps to 2/3 for the EU.
Now, India has been in the world headlines recently as thousands took to the streets in protest following the Supreme Court lifting a ban on women entering a historic Hindu temple. This as the country is also facing its own Me Too movement as the push continues to improve women's rights in a deeply traditional society. But this richly diverse country also is producing more and more female filmmakers, such as Rohena Gera. Her film, Sir, the tale of an improbable romance, has just been released here in France. Let's take a look.
टाइमिंग्स क्या है?
तू से जा, सारा काम खत्म करके जाऊंगा।
ठीक है।
Thank you, sir.
Once you cut a few thousand from their salaries, they are straight.
तुम बचपन से टेलर बनना चाहती थी। मैं तो सिर्फ इतना कह रहा हूँ कि फैशन की दुनिया में आगे बढ़ना बहुत मुश्किल होता है।
मुझ जैसों के लिए।
नहीं। रत्ना।
आप जो भी फील करें, आखिर में मैं आपकी सर्वेंट ही हूँ ना।
Look at things from her perspective. If you really like her, just let her be.
Tell me how you feel.
सर
Please, मुझे सर मत बोलो.
And Rohena Gera joins me in the studio today. Thanks for coming in, Rohena. Your film, which is incredibly uplifting, it's also about societal divisions and the ability to transcend them or not. It's the story of India. So I want to ask you, do you see a time when caste, racism and sexism disappears altogether in your country?
I don't know, but I have to hope that it will. I have to hope that someday that's what we work for. I need to hope that it is possible, that it can happen. Whether that'll happen in my lifetime or in my daughter's lifetime, I won't be able to say. But I think everywhere in the world, I think we need to hope for that.
What needs to happen in order to bring about those changes?
I think there are a lot of people who are working, a lot of women, a lot of men also who are working towards change. But I think it needs to come from everywhere.
So with this in mind, how hard is it for women filmmakers like yourself?
All first films are really difficult. I think for me, it's harder. What's harder as a woman sometimes is that the story that you want to tell, if the person at the other end of the table when you're pitching doesn't understand why you want to tell the story, doesn't feel the story, that's what makes it hard. If the story talks about a woman or the story is emotionally something they don't connect to. I don't like to think of myself as a victim and think, oh, my film would have been easier if I was a man. The stories that interest me may not be the same stories that interest a man. So that's what makes it harder.
And of course, men are still very much dominating the film industry, aren't they?
Oh yes, of course. I mean, there are a bunch of very dynamic women filmmakers who are now, increasingly getting attention, more in the art house space. But the industry is extremely male-dominated and extremely patriarchal still.
So how has the Me Too movement impacted Bollywood as a result?
I think it's starting a conversation, at least. I think for me, it's extremely meaningful that conversation is happening, because for the longest time when Me Too started in the West, I kept waiting to say, when are people going to start talking in India? And they weren't. People were too frightened for so long, So the fact that those people are starting to speak out, and women's stories are being questioned, of course. They're being doubted. They're being, really... it's very difficult for them to speak, because the first reaction is, oh, what does she have to gain by bringing him down so many years later, or things like this, But the fact that it exists, that there's a conversation, I think is extremely meaningful, in that maybe even that these men would have to think a little bit, I personally, I feel glad that there are men who are perhaps guilty and having sleepless nights and wondering, oh my God, is she going to speak?
Coming back to your film, the female protagonist is not a victim, is she? And there's a very strong feminist message as a result, isn't there?
For me, it was extremely important that she not be a victim. She's an extremely dynamic, motivated person. Both Tilotma and I, the actress, and I were very clear that she has her dignity, in terms of the performance, in terms of the script. For me, it's about this woman who rises above her situation, which is also how I see women in India. They're not defined by these difficult situations that they live in. They find a way to laugh and to survive and to transcend it.
They're circumnavigating the obstacles, aren't they?
Absolutely. Which is what a lot of us do. You have to find a way.
Not just in India.
Yeah. You have to find a way to work within a system sometimes, because it's not going to change in a hurry.
So are the portrayals of women in Indian films starting to change as a result?
There are some portrayals that are changing. They are showing women who are more open-minded, more outspoken. But it's still, I think it's a work in progress. What happens, I feel, is that it becomes either there are art house films that exist really only outside of India, that have a life outside of India, and then there are the mainstream films that have more of a life within India. What's interesting to me is to try to bridge that, to have a film that can have a mainstream life, that people in India can watch, and you find a way to reach that audience while actually taking on interesting and challenging subject matter. Not just talking about rape to a foreign audience.
Rohena, thanks for coming in.
Thank you so much.
And finally, in Bosnia Coppersmith, their skills have been passed from father to son for generations. Now, for the very first time, a woman has become an expert in the craft, defying stereotypes in a male-dominated industry. Clement Bonnereau has more.
This is Sarajevo's old Ottoman district, known as Bashchashia. Its streets are lined with centuries-old wooden buildings, fountains and coppersmith workshops. Nermina Alic was initiated into the trade by her 81-year-old father, Hadzan. By handing over the reins of the family business to his daughter, he broke the unwritten rules of the traditionally male-dominated trade.
My family didn't have much of a choice, as I'm their only child. And there was nobody else who could have inherited their workshop. It's just that my father didn't expect me to take over from him, because women are virtually non-existent in the coppersmith trade.
In the past, women were occasionally allowed to decorate the copperware, but the hand-beating of copper sheets used to make traditional household dishes and pots was strictly off-limits. Nermina says she practically grew up in her father's workshop, and she was drawn to all the different stages of copperwork long before she was aware of gender stereotypes.
The fact that I am a woman has never been an obstacle or a problem. People who know how to do a job well respect others who are also good at that job, regardless of their gender.
Nermina studied art and is now using her knowledge to expand the range of her handcrafted products, making candle holders and decorative lamps. It seems that for women in Bosnia, every cloud has a copper lining.
And that's it for now. You can also connect with us via our Facebook page, that of course being France24.51%, or do send us a tweet at _51%. So until our next show, bye for now.